Hello, and welcome to Speaking of Supply Chain, where we explore trends, current events, and innovations impacting the logistics and supply chain industries. I'm your host, Ellen Wood. We don't have any guests today. Today, we are just going to be doing a quick recap of the top 5 episodes of our first year. We have reached our 1-year anniversary of the podcast, and I'd like to go back and do a quick review of our 5 most popular episodes. So, coming in at number 5, we have It's All Fun and Games in Supply Chain. Now, this was one of our earlier episodes with Alex Waterings and Hans Kramer from InChange. And InChange is a company that has the Fresh Connection. The Fresh Connection is a business simulation game that helps companies kind of get a feel for what the other business units are doing in regard to the supply chain and how those business units interact with one another. So let's take a quick listen to the highlight from that episode.
This game will be played by people who are somewhat familiar with a supply chain. It will be unlikely that this game is going to be played by the legal counsel of any kind of a company. On the other hand, there should not also be a perfect match with the current entity. Because one of the things that we very often recommend is that a person who is really vested within sales would now take on the role of the financial controller of the Fresh Connection company, and the other way around, so that you can actually put yourself in the shoes of someone else.
As Alex pointed out in there, it's a good idea for businesses to kind of step out, or for people in business to step out of their normal role and get that perspective on what's happening in other business units. You know, maybe the sales guy needs to go and sit in the finance seat and understand what those individuals are looking for and what they're trying to accomplish in their day-to-day work, and vice versa, for that C-suite to come into the salesperson's shoes and understand what they're up against, or into that operations manager. It's just a great opportunity for these individuals who are making, major decisions on behalf of their company to really get a better understanding of how they work together and how they're all trying to accomplish the same goals in their own little way within the organization, but having that understanding of what everyone else is doing and how they're trying to accomplish their goal so that everyone meets the same finish line at the same time. It's just a really great opportunity. So if you are interested in the Fresh Connection, if you want to get in touch with InChange or with Henrik, you can go to inchange.com and you can either request a demo or a free trial. It's just a great opportunity. All right, moving on to number 4. If you are not one of our followers on YouTube, you really should be. You get to see all of my craziness as I'm looking from screen to screen. I've got 3 screens going on today, not just the 2. But coming in at number 4 is Unveiling Coming in at number 4 is Unveiling Global Disruptions, MEBOK's Risk Management Findings. And this episode was with Tim Wagner and Daniel Simon, and they were the authors of MEBOK's 2023 risk management or supply chain risk management study. This is a study that we ran in 2019 and then again in 2023. And obviously a whole lot happened in between those 2 versions of the study. And what they found was very interesting. Have a listen.
In case of these last 3 years, especially, we probably have to say none of us were prepared for what was coming. These risks that we faced were some of the probably most unprecedented that we have seen in the last decades. And usually when you draw up a risk matrix where you have those that have low impact and low probability, and you have those that have high probability and high impact, these were the ones that have low probability with high impact. So the ones that you don't expect, at least at this scale. So nevertheless, we found out that at least 94% of the companies that took part in this study latest now have a supply chain risk management process set up. So hopefully a lot of them were going in prepared, so that not this was a follow-up of the last 3 years, building up this supply chain risk management, but it was already set up before that. And what we also see is that the importance of the whole topic has been recognized and is one of the top priorities in most companies. So it goes up to C-level now that they are involved in this process, which is very important to make quick and decisive decisions once such risks break out.
So one of the interesting things from the study itself, and I'm looking at the study report on my other screen over here, and that is that supply chains are 40% more likely to have to deal with a disruption. Let me look at that statistic. Yeah, they're 40% more likely to be disrupted after COVID. And I don't know that that is necessarily useful in terms of trying to fix it or prepare for it. Obviously, when it comes to big disasters like a global pandemic, there's not a whole lot that we can do to be prepared, because you can't prepare for every eventuality. You have to be prepared for the ones that you have some hope of being able to mitigate or work through, and, focus on those things, those areas where you do have some control over the situation, or you do have at least control over your reaction to the situation. When it's something that globally disruptive, no one is ever going to be prepared enough. It's just not possible. You can't get on with day-to-day business if all you're doing is worrying about the sky falling. So there's a balance that has to be struck there in terms of being ready for a disruption, whether it is weather, whether it is, a geopolitical issue, whether it is a new law that's coming into effect. We've talked about all of these different types of disruptions in various episodes. But when it comes to this risk management and what supply chains and what organizations can do in order to kind of prepare and be ready to handle those types of things, there's only so much you can do, and we are glad to help companies out with that. But it's definitely something that is more prevalent in conversations in terms of what companies are doing to prepare their supply chains for a potential disruption. Risk management is a much bigger topic than it was in 2019. That is for certain. All right, on to number 3 on our list. And this episode is actually, again, following in that risk management. And this is our due diligence legislation that is coming into effect, and the EU due diligence that is also coming along with it. And this episode with Anastasia was incredibly interesting. Have a listen.
The only way forward for us to tackle all those environmental and general sustainability problems that we've got, we have to make that legislation more and more strict, and we have to go farther and farther, right? So this, if you look at the general problem of the social inequality or climate change, this legislation is kind of the drop in an ocean. So it's only the beginning, and I think the companies, I don't want to say to have to put up with it because maybe it's negative, but they have to change their awareness and change their perspective here, because there should be more legislation like that, and this is the first step to it. So right now they're asked to implement risk management system, but we know, for example, that in the European Union there are already discussions about having much more strict environmental legislations, for example, in the fashion industry, controlling what kind of fabric is used in the garment. Is it polyester? Is it cotton? Which fabrics can you combine so that they are more recyclable, and so on. So this is a lot stricter already.
All right. So one of the things that I found so interesting about that conversation with Anastasia was the way that companies are approaching and just really reacting to having this legislation put in place. So in a number of areas, companies are very forward with their sustainability initiatives. They're very forward with their governance internally in terms of human rights, in terms of sustainability, in terms of environmental impact. And all of those things are wonderful qualities to be concerned about and to have. I think in this age of cancel culture and consumers having a much broader awareness of the companies that they interact with, the companies that they purchase from. It's become a larger issue where companies are doing this in a proactive manner rather than a reactive manner. And Anastasia made a very good point that if we say they have to do it, there's a negative impact. When we have to legislate these things, it's not because we're telling people that you have to do something, although it is. I mean, that is the ultimate, consequence of having something enacted as a law, is that then everybody has to follow it, and there are consequences for not. But the other aspect of having this written down and aligned upon among the various geographies is that we're all bringing each other up. So the companies that have done a great job of being proactive about this in the first place, they're able to share those best practices and be the leader, to be the trendsetter when it comes to having some of those things in place. They're going to be the model that we look to say, okay, yes, we need to improve our sustainability. Yes, we need to improve some of these human rights issues. We need to make sure we're treating our people appropriately, that they're earning a wage that they can live on, that we're building a society and not just a business. So I love that some of these companies that have been in the forefront of this movement are now able to be our trendsetters. They're able to be our benchmark for what companies can achieve and how much further they can improve their supply chains, even within the constraints of you can't do anything and everything that you want. You can't be a bad steward of our environment. You need to improve yourself. You need to be better. We need to elevate everyone together. And if for those who have done it, great job. Share your secrets. And I know that we have some additional information. This is not a one-time conversation that we're going to have about sustainability, about some of these more social issues. These are becoming everyday topics in boardrooms across the globe. And so the more we talk about them, the more we will be able to bring some of those best practices, some of those, really big things that move the needle significantly and can have those big impacts on supply chains, not just in terms of adherence with legislation, but also in terms of being that company that people want to do business with because they feel good about the way that company maintains their supply chain, maintains their operations, or even their products. All right. Top 2. Our second most popular episode in the first year of Speaking of Supply Chain. And this is getting innovation and technology, AI, and changing material handling in the supply chain. Let's have a listen.
We have many suppliers for all the parts, and also some in stock. So that's one of the biggest advantage. We only have one key element, and it could be applied for many applications, for many products, and also for many industries. And normal companies or traditional companies have specific products for specific applications, and our specification or customization is the software. So basically, it's a software product at the moment. It's not. It looks. It looks, but it's the main part is the software. And the software is on different areas. You have in the communication protocol between the cells, you have intelligent control software, and you have an application software, and you have this AI part, recognizing the parcels, make a control, and making corrections in the movements or changing the path of the parcels. That's all together. It's a robot. It looks like a conveyor, but it's a robot.
All right. How innovative is that? So as a recap, Henrik Thamer is the founder of Cellumation, and they have one of my favorite conversations, the upside down sucker robots. Isn't it amazing how innovation can spark, from the most innocuous of places? He was out having a beer and looking at these soccer robots and thought, what if we turn it upside down? And all of a sudden now he's got this amazing innovation for material handling, parcel handling inside facilities, and it's a soccer robot turned upside down. I love it. It's hilarious. But some of the amazing things about these innovative designs are their applications. And as he mentioned, yes, there is a physical component to these cellumation tables, these movers that are able to move the parcels wherever they want. But the brains and really the effectiveness and what takes this to the next level is all the software programming that's behind it, that is able to gather data from what it's doing in the moment, and using AI, it's able to move that package to wherever it needs to be based on whether it was a scan from a sticker or a marking on the side of the box, whether it's information on the weight of the box. And because this particular product from Cellumation is such a it's a buildable, like it's like Lego bricks. You can customize it to whatever size, to whatever field is necessary. But it's so simple in its design, and so powerful in its application, that it can be utilized in any number of different situations and provide value for that company that's trying to move all this information, or move all this product, I should say, with all of this information, and increase their productivity. Even when these large conveyance systems wouldn't fit into some of these facilities. I know we've talked about micro fulfillment centers in some other episodes, and we've talked about getting into urban areas and into buildings that weren't necessarily designed for material handling. So having this buildable and customizable option for material handling, and that has the AI behind it that enables it to make some more intelligent decisions based on the business need, I think is just a fantastic innovation. I love talking with guests that bring some of this innovation to the table. It's so cool. It's one of the best parts of this job than sitting in this chair. All right. We are down to the final one. Before we get to our most popular episode of Speaking of Supply Chain, Season 1, Year 1, I did want to call out, again, if you are not one of our listeners or one of our followers that follows on YouTube, you really should go and check out some of that video content. So all of our audio episodes are, of course, available on your favorite podcast platforms, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We're available on all of those. But if you were to go to our YouTube channel and view some of the video content, you get not only that final podcast episode, but you also get some behind the scenes information. You get some behind the scenes banter and conversation that takes place that does not make it to our final audio cut. One of the things that we do on those episodes is we have an icebreaker question where I get to know our guests a little bit better. I don't want to just jump into a conversation about supply chain. Yes, it's interesting, but the people in supply chain are what make it really interesting. Just like Henrik and coming up with these ideas while he's out having a beer, I want to know what drives people, what makes them interested in supply chain, but just as individuals. So we do an icebreaker question. I never make our guests answer this question on their own. I also answer it as well, so you get to know a little bit more about me. But there's some great content, some great behind the scenes conversations with some of these guests that I'm meeting for the first time as part of the podcast, and also some of those guests that I have known for years in my career here in supply chain and with Meebach. And there are some fantastic individuals out there. But not only that, do you get to see all of that information. You can view our micro video content. You can view the full length videos. But in addition to that, you get to see some of these amazing people. And if you are also one of those amazing people that has some great innovations, that has some great ideas, that's doing some big things in your own company's supply chain, I want to invite you not only to follow us on your podcast and subscribe to our podcast, not only to follow us on YouTube and have access to that video content that you get to know us a little bit better, but reach out to me. come be a guest on this podcast. Come talk to me about whatever it is that's going on in your supply chain, what's going on in your organization, those innovations that you've got going on in the background that are making a difference in your company's supply chain. We'd love to have you on the show. The best way to do that is to shoot me an email, podcast@mebach.com. It's as easy as that. You send me the email, I will send you a meeting request, and we will get you behind the microphone. All right, we are down to our number one episode, and it is no surprise that this is the top episode for the year. It was also one of our earlier episodes, so that may have something to do with why it's so popular as we gain new listeners and they go back and listen to some of the content. But our most popular episode has had over 250 downloads, which is a lot for a podcast in its first year. That's significant. But this episode is Supply Chain Forecasting with Advanced Analytics. Have a listen.
We don't have like this crystal ball, right? I mean, no one is going to be a magician and tell you like, hey, in 2 months, this is going to be happening. But at least to me, let's say that we are going to be creating this kind of mechanisms, like, for example, prescriptive tools, right? That could tell us like, hey, when this happens, how we should be reacting and which kind of decisions we're going to be taking, right? Because to me, it's like not even planning, but actually planning to be covered to minimize the risks that we're going to be having with any kind of like potential disruptions that we're going to be facing in the future.
All right. In that episode, which was really interesting, but it touches on some of the other episodes that we've already covered today that have resonated with so many individuals working in supply chain, and that is dealing with risk, dealing with information that we need to understand in order to avoid some of those risks and plan around it. But when it comes to forecasting and planning, it's not just looking at what has historically happened and what's going to happen, but trying to uncover some of the additional information, the insights that can be gained through that data. And that is going to be so huge going forward, as Gustavo and Jillian were talking in that particular episode about, how that data comes together, how we're able to look at that data and understand it and mine for all of the insights that can be gleaned from that. It's not just about, what do we do next, but what do we do next and what happens if, something else comes into play? What is plan B? What is plan C? And how can we build a program or a plan for this forecast that is going to be resilient enough to weather the storm? Because we know that storms happen. We know that those risks take place. We know that there are going to be disruptions. We know that there are going to be outside forces, causing us to act or react in certain ways when it comes to sustainability measures that need to be implemented or anything like this. We know that there is going to be change. It's the one constant we can count on. So the more we can look into our own data and understand what that's going to mean for the future, the better prepared we can all be. All right. That brings us to the end of our top 5 Speaking of Supply Chain episodes of 2023. I hope you have enjoyed listening and tuning in to Speaking of Supply Chain. I enjoy producing this content and being able to sit down and talk with all of our guests, learn something new every single time I get behind this microphone, and really get a better feel of what is going on in our industry. I hope that's the same for you. If not, you know what? You probably need to call me and tell me what's going on in your neck of the woods. So as always, thanks for tuning in and listening to Speaking of Supply Chain. Follow us in whatever podcast platform you prefer, whether it's Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Apple Podcasts, and tune in next time.